This is the PowerBreak podcast number 048, titled Your Work Matters. Hi, I'm Bob Brubaker, along with JT, as we hope you'll stay tuned as we seek to give you a little power in this break to help you succeed in the race of life.
This is the PowerBreak podcast with a focus on the spiritual, the mental, and the physical aspects, all to help you succeed in the race of life. For show notes from today's podcast, go to bobbrubaker.com and follow the link for the PowerBreak podcast.
JT, you're looking good, buddy. You're getting in shape.
I am getting in shape. I'm a little skinnier, Howard, so I won't break your scale this time.
I think people are wondering, who is this Howard guy anyway?
Oh, yeah.
Well, we're talking. He's our doctor.
He is our doctor.
Yeah, and he likes to try to keep us.
We share many things. Apparently, we also share a doctor as well. But because of HIPAA, we can't talk about it.
Oh, that's right. So, folks, just pretend you didn't hear that last statement. Let's talk about this. Who is JT and who is Bob Brubaker? So, we're going to talk about that for a moment because I heard on not a PowerBreak podcast, another podcast that I listen to on how to do a podcast. I always want to improve. And this guy says, hey, you should reintroduce yourself from time to time because at least you expect new listeners. And I think we are. Our listenership seems to be growing.
Yes.
And we appreciate everybody telling others about the podcast and subscribing and telling others to subscribe, and also leave us a review and a rating wherever you download the podcast. And we appreciate that. So let's back up and say, so there are new people listening to the PowerBreak podcast, and we hear about this guy named JT. Who in the wide world of sports is JT?
Who is that dude? I often ask myself the same question. My real name is John Tribino. The only one that actually calls me JT is anybody who's either friends with Bob or Bob himself. I'm a Largo police officer here in Largo, Florida. I have been for 22 years. I am a father of two. I have an awesome wife named Amy. I'm a deacon at my church. I lead worship at my church. I play guitar. Nobody wants me to sing, I promise you.
We want you to sing on this program.
Me, very bad. So that's really who I am. I'm a follower of Jesus Christ, which is the most important thing.
That's right.
Yeah, and that's who I am. How about you,
and
Bob?
You're a pretty good cyclist, as I recall. And one of these days, I'll see you back on the bike again. And,
you will.
You're running and keeping in shape. And so there you go. That's the JT.
That's me. How about you, Bob?
Well, let's see. My name is Bob Brubaker, and I'm the pastor of Christ Community Presbyterian Church here in Clearwater, Florida. Been here now 12, going on 13 years, and I'm married to my beloved wife, Jan, and we have no children, but very thankful that we have been in ministry. I've been in ministry since 1983.
I know. It's awesome.
I've been blessed to have done 19 Ironman triathlons, and so I guess that's a statement of fact. And then I was one breath from death, but look what God can do.
Yep.
And God spared my life in 2005 when I almost died from a rare lung disease, and I'm still kicking on. So that's who we are. Bob and JT, we kind of we've been doing this before we started to record. We started a little discipleship time and been meeting for a long period of time, riding bikes together whenever we could. And lo and behold, we said, let's start a podcast. We'll just turn on the microphones and let it roll. So that's what you're getting here.
Yeah. Welcome to our Bible study. That's what this
is Bob and JT. It's a little more organized than what we have. But anyway, JT, we're talking about work today. So I think it's important that folks hear from you because you have a very special place, and sometimes you can get caught in the humdrum of life and at your work.
Sure. Yep.
But how do you see your work as a police officer in the light of God's calling on your life?
For me, oftentimes I go back to "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God." I go back to that a lot because the truth is that oftentimes we're the thing that kind of holds everything together, and that's what I've been paid to do. I know looking back on 22 years, if I'm being really conservative, I can tell you that physically there are 5 or 6 people here, probably 6 here, that wouldn't be here if I didn't show up as a police officer,
Wow.
like actually save their life. And that doesn't count all the little connections that I've made by having to go out and just be there for people during their crisis. Because that's really what a police officer is. Don't get me wrong. The adrenaline stuff I loved when I was younger, and there was a lot of you always wanted to be on the SWAT team, and I did all that stuff, and I had an awesome career. But the bottom line is, I was talking to one of my friends the other day, and as a police officer, this absolutely was where God wanted me to be, period, end of story, because he knew that I had the ability and the talents, because he gave them to me, to go out and actually be good at that job and actually be there for other people. Because bottom line is that's what a police officer is, when you get away from all the shenanigans,
Folks, that's unrehearsed. We just brought it up from my PowerBreak blog, and that's unrehearsed. That's great, JT. That's good stuff, man.
Yeah, well, thanks. That's 100% from the heart.
Wow.
And believe me, I have to remind myself about that all the time, because police work has politics just like everything else, and the politics are the things that make it difficult. But the truth is that there are a lot of young officers that I've been able to give great counsel and training to, that will go on and do great things too, and it's really been such a great thing to look back on. But how about you? I mean, obviously, your work is important to God as a pastor and a leader of a flock here at Christ Presbyterian. But how is it a calling for you?
Well, it has to be a calling, because as this old preacher by the name of Martin Lloyd-Jones says to young preachers, if you can do anything else, do it.
So encouraging.
But that means if you're really called by God, you can't do anything else. You have to do this. It's kind of like Jeremiah in the Old Testament. The prophet Jeremiah decided he wasn't going to preach anymore. He gave it up, and then he said, God's word is like fire within my bones that is shut up. I've got to speak.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what Martin Lloyd-Jones was talking about. And I tried different things. I was in radio and television for a while, and I thought, this is the calling on my life, is to be a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And here I am. Anyway, God's calling is there for us, and we're to follow that, and includes the work that we do, because the work that we do does matter to him. A guy named Martin Luther.
I have heard of him.
Yeah,
yes.
he is. Yeah, okay. One of his statements was he really believed in vocational calling, because at that time the church was the people that were called of God, and the other people were just peasants. He said, no, you treat your work, your calling there is as important as my work is as a minister of the gospel. Your work is just as important to God, because you are doing God's work in that vocation. And like you said, you see that your calling is a calling from God. Ephesians chapter 4 says that we are to walk in the worthy manner, or the manner worthy of our calling, okay, for which you've been called. In 1 Corinthians chapter 10, it says, whether we eat or drink or whatever we do, we're to do all to the glory of God. So every day when you get up and do whatever you're doing in life, do it as unto the Lord, for that's your calling, because your work matters to God.
It does. It does, for sure. I think that we need to talk a little bit more about that as we turn to your blog. So, folks, if you haven't been to bobbrubaker.com and you haven't clicked on the PowerBreak blog itself, I would encourage you to do that, and I would encourage you to subscribe to it. It will just show up right in your email, unless your email is broken like mine. So if you've sent me something recently, I apologize.
I heard of people contacting you, too.
Were there people contacting me? I'm telling you, my email is all messed up.
Oh, that's a sad story. The JT at bobbrubaker.com?
Oh, no. That one's probably fine, but I can't get my phone
can't retrieve it
to go to anything right now, because me and Apple are apparently having a fight. I was unaware we were involved in a fight, but apparently we are. So we'll get it figured out. I would encourage you guys absolutely to go and subscribe to that. Every Monday it'll pop in your email. And man, it is such an encouraging thing to open up first thing Monday as we start our week, right after the Lord's Day. Man, it's really cool. So I would absolutely encourage people to do that. But let's turn to your published article now.
You know what time I send that out, by the way, on Mondays?
What time?
4 o'clock.
4 o'clock in the morning?
Well, I do
Is that automatic, I hope?
No, it's not automatic, but it's actually the systems. I put it up on the website at 4 o'clock when I first get up. And that's what time I get up, folks. I don't act
4
like
o'clock?
Don't act like I'm something special. It's just
you are something
the
special.
Internal clock goes off.
Your mom was right, Bob. You are special.
Well, on that PowerBreak blog, just a couple of highlights here. Your work does matter to God, because next time you feel that your work doesn't matter, or you're stuck in doing something that seems to be a meaningless task, you just remember this, that you were designed for work. Here's what it says in Genesis chapter 1. God said, "Let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air and of the heavens and the livestock over all the earth, over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created him, male and female. He created them. There are many ways to consider being made in God's image, but one way is to consider the fact that God is a worker himself.
Yeah.
Okay? Then you consider how we're to imitate him and work in like manner. First of all, God is a planner. Planning is a basic part of work, and so something we may just want to overlook at this, but consider this, that God planned everything, even from the end, from the beginning, as it says in Isaiah chapter 46, verses 9 through 10. And it's quite a remarkable thing that God started out planning things. That He planned things even before the foundation of the world.
Yeah.
Okay. Secondly, God is a craftsman. When you go through the account of creation in Genesis or other places in the Bible, you see how God crafted the world out of nothing, and then man out of the dust of the ground. So when you consider the intricacies of creation, you see his handiwork as a creator. No wonder people find such fulfillment in crafting things, be it a recipe, be it a home project or a computer program, whatever, or as JT does, crafts a new song from time to time.
That's true. I do every once in a while.
See there. Thirdly, consider God as the organizer. This is the one that's really thrilling, because in Genesis chapter 1, it says that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. And then it says the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And then he brought order out of chaos.
Order out of chaos.
Wow. So our brains really have a hard time considering that, but just consider the fact that next time that you think of your work, that you make some plans at your work, which I think you do as an officer of the law. And, of course, when you consider the fact that craftsman, and you are a craftsman at your position as an officer of the law.
For sure.
And, of course, you're an organizer.
Yep.
You bring order out of chaos. That's what you do, JT.
I do.
Okay.
That is my job.
So what we're doing is we're created in the image of God, and so there's some more we'd like to talk about that, but just thinking about the fact that God has a place for us all, and our work matters to God. I thought about that the other day when I saw a guy mowing his yard. Okay, and he was straining. Sometimes you mention that. Although, no, I don't know.
Well, it's only 1,000,000 degrees down here. That's the strain part.
Yeah. Okay, what you're doing is bringing order out of chaos.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
So you're making things look good. And that's what Adam was actually given that job before he sinned.
Yep.
He was given work to do. Now, after he sinned, that was when God said, by the sweat of your brow that you bring bread to eat.
Yep.
So the curse was that we would find strain and hard times in working. But the work was given to Adam before he sinned.
Right.
There's purpose in that.
Right.
Anyway, your work matters to God. Check it out at bobbrubaker.com. Look for the blog there. It's our weekly blog. As JT mentions, you can sign up for it and it'll come to your...
It'll come right at you.
Yes, sir.
Apparently at 4 o'clock on Monday, which I was unaware because JT is not up at 4 o'clock on Monday.
Why not?
Yeah, no. Yeah,
Would you like me to call you?
Oh, that'd be great. That'd be perfect. I'll tell you what, I'll put the phone right next to Amy. Let me know what she says.
PowerBreak Blog is found.
It'll turn out great.
We better get out of this one. The PowerBreak Blog is found at bobbrubaker.com.
All right, what else is going on, Bob? Anything new happening?
Well, I just want to give a little word here for the newest book that I've published called Finding Delight in the Lord's Day. The Lord's Day, of course, is a very special day. The Lord's Day is Sunday, of course, and it's a time when you worship God, and it's time that you take a break from other things that cause distraction. And some people look at it as a hassle because they just want to pack in more during the week, and they wonder why they're tired on Monday.
Yeah,
God has designed an oasis in the desert. He's called it the Sabbath, and in the New Testament, the Sabbath is this first day of the week, and we call it the Lord's Day because the Lord was risen on the first day of the week. Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, I put down some thoughts to go by and just consider the fact that you can make it a very special day for you and your family, and you'll find it to be a delight. Finding delight in the Lord's Day, you can find it at bobbrubaker.com. Click on the link for the books and scroll down to Finding Delight in the Lord's Day. And while you're there at the website, check out our sermon links to sermons that I preach here at Christ Community Presbyterian Church.
All right. Here we go, my friend. It is time for What About This? That's our time for question and answers here on the show. If you have a question that you want Bob to answer or me to answer, like I always say, I would go with Bob. But if you want me to do it, I'll do it. I'm here to serve.
JT amazes us all the time, folks. So bring your questions to JT. No problem.
Even a blind squirrel finds a nut sometimes.
Is that a granny?
It is. That's my grandmother. She used to always say it. Even a blind squirrel finds a nut. Because, I'd walk in all proud of something, and she'd be like, huh.
I get it.
Yeah. Anyway, so if you have a question for us, it's jt@bobbrubaker.com, and we will get to answering that on an upcoming Power Break. And I promise I will fix my Apple email so I can actually get into the real email there. Question number 1, my friend. Are you ready?
Yep.
All right. Let's talk about our work and continue talking about our work. So you said that we should view our work as a spiritual act of serving God Himself. How can we do that, and how is it important that we do it?
Well, consider this, that everything we do matters to God. So we are to be good stewards with everything He's provided. And one of the things He provides for us are the work opportunities in life. We're told in the book of Colossians that when we are working, he says we're not to be men pleasers or eye pleasers, or people pleasers, doing something out of insincerity, but we're to do it with sincerity, fearing the Lord. And so then he uses these words. Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward, and you are serving the Lord Christ. That's important.
That's the utmost important thing to remember.
And we have to also remember when God put man in the garden, He gave him work to do, okay? And it was after the sin of rejecting God, actually, and taking of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that then God placed a curse, and God said that it was by the sweat of the brow or the sweat of the hard times the man would receive his bread. In other words, he would find things to eat. But he says that was after the fall. So when we look at the struggles that we have at our work, it's not the work that is the struggle. The work is honoring to God. The struggle is because we live in a sin-cursed world.
Right.
Because of sin, we have that same problem earning our living. Okay, there's struggles, there's tension, there's hard times.
Yep.
Okay, and so again in Ephesians, he says when you're serving your master, he's talking about bond servants. That's kind of equivalent to an employer-employee relationship today. Right. And he says that you're not to do an eye service as people pleasers, but as bondservants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, rendering service with a good will as to the Lord and not to man, knowing that whatever good anyone does, he will receive back from the Lord, whether he is a bondservant or is he free. So then there's instructions to masters or employers. But the point is, whatever we're doing, okay, we are there because God has brought us there. He's opened the door. He's given us the talent and the resources, just as you mentioned in your own life.
Yep.
Okay. And now he says, I expect you to be a good steward with what I have provided. How are you using this gift of work? Because it does matter to me.
I never forget that before Christ started his ministry, he was a carpenter. And I come from a family that has multiple carpenters. That was their life. Almost everybody in my family has worked with their hands. My father was a engine mechanic all the way up to like serious engines, like, NASA type engines. And I have 2 that were upholsterers and several that were carpenters, all my uncles on my father's side. And I think about what that is. You're a craftsman. That's what you are. You are a craftsman. And the things come out of your shop looking beautiful and perfect. And that's what Christ ended up doing in his ministry,
Right.
was, but before that, he worked with his hands.
Well, it's also interesting, you're a craftsman at what you do.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. And, the person that is running a cash register
is a craftsman.
They're a craftsman.
Yep, for sure.
Whatever we're doing, it's a calling from God, and we need to take it like that because it does matter. So work is good. It's from God. Every work is an opportunity, and an opportunity to serve God at our work, and should be taken as such.
So kind of working off that, is it wrong to look for another job if you decide, this isn't for me, wherever you are at that point?
As anything, we look for God to direct us in life, and sometimes God is using things to test us, difficulties at work or difficulties, dissatisfaction or whatever. Sometimes it is a prodding from God to move on out.
Yep.
Sometimes it's a test from God to see if you're going to trust Him or you're going to try to do things on your own.
Yep.
And sometimes it's a sanctifying process that we have to endure the hardness of what we're going through. Okay. But it's not a bad thing to desire a better opportunity. But we bring it back to the fact we just realize that everything, we're seeking the will of God.
And that's the most important part.
And we're praying for His leading and His timing and for His glory to be exalted in our work. And for that means if you don't get the job or the advancement, He has a purpose in your character.
Yeah.
And He is stick it out as you work for Him under the circumstances where you presently are. And it's not wrong to look around, but keep in mind you do it through prayer. You do it through asking Him to direct you and consider how He's directing you, and realize if He closes the door, it's not the end of the world. It's God saying, I still have a place for you where you are.
Yeah, and a lot of that is the perseverance side of it. I see a lot of that at churches when people leave churches because, they get
their feelings hurt or whatever.
Yeah, or they're bored or, it's not entertaining to them, whatever the case may be. But out of that perseverance comes character, and I see that everywhere in Scripture. That's the thing that God's doing for you, is building you through perseverance. And we forget that so many times. So I see a lot of people, what was the thing that I just read? It was something ridiculous, like your average person leaves their job after 4 or 5 years or something.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's absolutely, me at 22 years, I feel like, somebody from the Stone Age, for lack of a better way to put it, or with you've been in the same profession for that long, but
people they're taught today that if things aren't going well, you just leave. And sometimes when we leave, we have to understand if we have not worked things out where we are, if God is developing our character where we are, and we leave, we take us with us.
Yes, and He's going to develop it at the new place.
Yeah.
And they might not be as forgiving.
Yeah,
for lack of a better way to put it.
Yeah. So there you go. Just so as the word is from JT, persevere and stick it out until God shows you this is exactly what I want you to do. But in the meantime, if you do look, there's nothing wrong with it. Just don't get obsessed by it, because again, if you get obsessed with looking, how hard it is to go back to your job and be satisfied.
Yeah, for sure. Because
you're always looking.
Grass is greener syndrome is not the place you want to be. That's for sure. All right. Next question from the mental standpoint. I get the feeling somehow that you're going to talk about time management and how important time management is to our role to honoring God in our work.
You're right.
I knew it. How did I know it? Because time management is such an important part of this, too.
It really is, because it's a matter of stewardship. We see our work as a gift from God, And then how we use the 168 hours in a week, it really does matter. And so if you're skipping out on your work, okay, if you're not doing the job, we have to answer to God as well as how we're using our time and our talent and our treasure. Remember in Matthew chapter 25 when Jesus was talking about the parable of the talents, and he's the one that received the 5 other talents for the talents he had. He says, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a little. I'll set you over much. Sometimes then, going back to what we were just talking about for the new job,
Yep.
Do you ever think about how God would look and say, how have you treated the job that you have?
Yes.
I mean, in Luke chapter 16, he says, if you've not been faithful in a little, how will God entrust more to you?
Yeah, that's for sure.
Okay.
And I often think about that. If I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing now, how could I ever expect God to give me something that I perceive to be better?
Yeah.
And most of the time, the thing that I perceive to be better, by the way, is not better.
We get
It's usually not.
caught up in the commercialism.
Yeah, for sure.
So he says in Ephesians chapter 5, when he's talking about being good stewards then, and he says, look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. Do not get drunk with wine, that is debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit. And we're filled with the Spirit. We're going to follow what the Word of God says, including how we work and how we approach work and how we use the 168 hours that God gives us each and every week.
Yeah.
Well, so your work and your time, everything about it matters to God. And seeing the responsibility to use all that we have to His glory means we see ourselves not just as left to our own, but stewards who've been given time, talent, and treasure and opportunities to make the most for Him. So take serious the responsibility, which means you are raised up even from the menial task to saying, I'm doing this for God.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and as a church, I think overall, one of the things that I just like to communicate is the part about being good stewards, but also focusing on the time and using the time wisely, because we have such an incredible habit. We'll get to that tomorrow. Especially when it comes to the stuff that we know is hard, right? But the church really isn't in a position now anymore, in my personal opinion, for us to be like that.
That's right.
We absolutely need to be the people that are willing to do the hard work, because that's how people know who we are.
There you go.
Is the love and the hard work that we can put in. So I would encourage people,
Go JT.
Don't do it. Don't wait to do it tomorrow. Do it today.
There you go.
All right. I think we need to turn to the physical, and I think the physical on this one is so incredibly important. So how is honoring your physical condition a part of this? It's a stewardship thing, isn't it?
It sure is. And we are stewards of everything which we have received. He says, what do you have that you have not received? In 1 Corinthians chapter 4 and verse 7. What do you have in life that you have not received? The word is nothing.
Nothing.
Okay.
That's right.
And he says it's required of stewards that they be found faithful. It's interesting. I was talking to a man recently who is putting off getting hearing aids. Okay. And it was,
I have so many jokes, but
it wasn't a joke.
Away from all of them.
It wasn't a joke. And so he was kind of being braggadocious, not braggadocious really, but he was just going on how he didn't want to spend the money. And even though people have told him he needs to get hearing aids.
Right.
Okay. And I said, now you're a good steward with everything you have. I know you're a good steward with your money, and you're a good steward with your talent, because you're just always helping everybody
all
awesome.
The
time.
Yep.
I said, so we're to be good stewards with our bodies, right? He said, oh, yeah. I said, I notice you don't smoke. I said, well, no. He says, our body's the temple of the Holy Spirit. Okay, so you're to be good stewards with your body. I said, so if you know how to take care of your body and you didn't do it, would that be a good steward?
Right about that point, he wasn't liking you very much, by the way.
No, actually, he said I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
He said, I'm going to go and check out hearing aids today.
That's it. The Holy Spirit needs a hearing aid, people. You heard it here first. At least in that one example.
Yeah, it was well taken, and I appreciate the opportunity to just point it out. It's interesting because I was studying on the stewardship a lot, and that's what it is. And
Yeah.
so I just realized God gave me that stuff to study for a specific purpose. The point it comes down to this: we're to be disciplined in all that we do.
Yes.
Okay, including taking care of our bodies, because we want to make the most use of our bodies in our work as well as all of our lives, right? And so we're to be good stewards. So it's a matter of discipline, and discipline makes the difference in all aspects of life. So check out today's show notes at bobbrubaker.com. Click on the PowerBreak podcast. Today's show is number 048.
And submit your questions by email to jt@bobbrubaker.com and listen for Bob's answer on an upcoming PowerBreak podcast.
Before we take off here, just a quick word for my basic prayer training. I'll get things right here. Basic prayer training, a little book that I wrote on just how to pray, really. Just taking from the Lord's Prayer, some very simple instructions, but how many times people do not pray because they don't feel like they know how to pray.
Yeah, for sure.
They don't take time to pray because they don't know how. Anyway, that's what this is all about. And I wrote it to help a friend of mine. I just shared it because I published the book. It's on my website at bobbrubaker.com. Click on the books and go to the list of books, the pictures of the books, and actually the Basic Prayer Training is the name of the book. Check it out.
Well, thank you for joining us for the PowerBreak podcast. Please subscribe and leave a review wherever you've downloaded the podcast, and check out the show notes, news, Bob's weekly blog, and other cool things at bobbrubaker.com. Listen next time for the PowerBreak podcast.